This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Hi, welcome to a new edition of Behind the Headlines. I'm Charlie Greenawalt, Senior Fellow of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. And I'm joined by my co-host, Maura Donnelly. Maura, welcome to the show.
Hello, Charlie.
Well, things are getting lively in Harrisburg,
They
aren't
certainly
they?
are.
Well, and I think probably I'm going to surprise you in the way that I'm talking about liveliness. Here, just a few blocks from the state capitol the other day, we had two state representatives who were accosted by some local, if you will, thugs, and there was a shootout.
Yeah.
I mean, when our state representatives are engaged in a shootout just a few blocks away from the Capitol, I don't know, what does that say?
Well, it doesn't say a whole lot about downtown Harrisburg right now, but they're working on it.
They are working on it. Representatives Bizzarro and Flynn, and I guess Representative Flynn had the sidearm and
Gun-toting representatives.
allowed them to escape. But yeah, so things are heating up in Harrisburg. But we also, of course, have the gubernatorial race coming up, of course, and races in the General Assembly. And we're very fortunate to have with us today the two men that are leading this effort, the two best people to talk to about these races, and of course that's Rob Gleason. Rob, welcome to the show. You are the chair of the Republican Party of Pennsylvania.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. And Jim Byrne, you are the chair of the Democratic Party. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Why, the other day I'm listening to Tom Brokaw, and Tom Brokaw, of course, has this little radio show that he does every day. It's just a minute. And he said that the other day he had a very refreshing experience. He was listening to a gubernatorial debate, and it was between Governor Corbett and Tom Wolf, the Democratic challenger out of Hershey. And he said they talked about issues. They were polite to one another. The debate moved along. There was no acrimony. There was no name calling, and he thought that it was a wonderful exhibition of democracy. And at the end of it, and he said, and of course, I'm going to vote for Tom. How would you characterize this campaign? Let's start with you, Mr. Byrne.
Sure. I think what Mr. Brokaw commented on was accurate. I think the snapshot that he saw or listened to was a good paradigm of how the two gentlemen have conducted themselves for the most part. Every so often when you get to an issue that is obviously contentious, that we disagree with or that Mr. Corbett disagrees with, the emotions will get high, the rhetoric will get high, the vocal cords, the decibels will go up a little bit. We see that. That's an inevitability. But for the most part, what I think we've seen with these two candidates is a focus on issues, whether it's the education or the extraction issue, name one. They've drilled down with specificity on what their concerns are and why they think they're the better candidate.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. Politics should never be personal. I try to never make it personal. I think in Pennsylvania, we have a great history of both parties being gentlemen and gentlewomen and dealing with each other and not making issues about issues and not making about personality. So I think Tom Brokaw saw that with Tom Wolf and Governor Corbett.
Okay, well, let's get down to brass tacks here. We have a very tightening race, according to the most recent polls. The range is anywhere from about 7 points to, I think, 17, somewhere around there. So what do you, I know the most important poll is on Election Day, but tell us what your perspective right now is on how this race is looking.
Well, I think it is tightening up. I mean, the races usually tighten up at the end. I think this summer it was 25 points or something like that. Tom Wolf was ahead. So, but I've been around this for a long time. I knew it would tighten, and so our latest polls, I think the Inquirer this morning or yesterday said it was around 7 points. I like that. Obviously, that is tightening. I'd rather be ahead, but we're coming in. And I feel that it is tightening. I think people are starting to pay a lot more attention to the race. Mm-hmm. When they take polls in the summer and early, people don't pay a lot of attention to it. And in fact, it's always been my feeling now that national politics is overshadowing all local politics. And they're thinking about president already. And what they really need to think about is this election and a lot of other elections. And I'm not just about the governor, neither is Jim. I mean, there's a state legislature that it's very important to me and congressmen. So As you know, in this ballot, in some jurisdictions, there will only be 3 names on the ballot. You know, where they don't have a state Senate race, it'll just be governor, it'll be a congressman, and it'll be a state legislator. So that's caused a lack of interest that I can see, and I'm expecting a pretty light turnout.
That's a concern for both parties. I think it was an inevitability that we were going to see the polls get tighter. I truly agree with that. The question in any campaign, and both candidates in our camps and our parties will tell this to our base, don't read the polls. It's going to be about who is more engaged and who has the better field plan in delivering the message, identifying your voter, recruit that voter, and then the difficult part, Rob, getting that voter out of the house on election day into the polls. Whoever does a better job that day will win. But Rob's right. It's so nationally driven anymore. Everybody's on the 24-hour news cycle of Fox or CNN or MSNBC. And I can tell you as a former local elected official, that's what fuels the engine. Your local, from the ground up, office holders. And unfortunately, because of this media frenzy of national candidates and the sparring that we see, the attention is taken away oftentimes from the races that matter the most. And it creates a lethargic approach sometimes when you get closer to a general election. Incumbent upon Rob and I and our candidates and our teams to make sure our voters stay engaged and we get them out.
That's probably my most important thing, is to get out the vote. The governor will decide what he's going to talk about and his ads and so on and so forth. My job is to get out the vote, and that's what I'm focused on for the next 2 weeks.
John Bear of the Philadelphia Daily News wrote at the very beginning of this campaign, of course, brought up what both of you are very familiar with, and that is the famous cycle in Pennsylvania gubernatorial history since the Second World War, that we've had 8 years of Republican rule, 8 years of Democratic rule, 8 years of Republicans, 8 years of Democrats. That's not so remarkable since we've changed our Constitution in the late 60s so that the governor could succeed himself. But before that, when the governor couldn't succeed himself, that was remarkable to have 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats. And it seems like Tom Corbett is supposed to win this race according to the cycle, and that sometimes the cycle seems to affect even who's willing to run. It seemed some years ago, it would have been in 1986, that Bill Scranton III was going to beat that cycle. And then there was someone from Louisiana that came up here and ran a very wily campaign. The Ragin' Cajun came up here before he went and led President Clinton's election campaign and got Governor Casey elected. Jim Carville.
Carville.
Yeah,
right.
Jim Carville. I'm sorry.
I don't know about, I don't really believe in cycles. I mean, I should believe in them. That means that Corbett would be automatic. I never did. I don't believe in those things. Remember, things have changed an awful lot anymore in electioneering. I mean, we are now, with electronic media, with the internet, with social media, I mean, we're approaching this campaign much differently than we have any other campaign. In fact, we learned a lot from Barack Obama whenever he, the way he won his election 6 years ago, and our party nationally and here in Pennsylvania. We've learned a lot about that, and we're applying these techniques to what we're going to do, and that's why I feel pretty confident about our ability to win this election, because I think that we are going to have a great turnout amongst Republicans using these techniques that we learned from the Democrats or from Barack Obama. So it's different today, and I think it's really changed. The thing that helps in the cycle, I think, is that the incumbent has served the people. They voted for him before, and I think one of the things that helps Tom Corbett this time is that Pennsylvanians have voted for him almost 11 million times. When you think about that, and you go back to all the times he's won for Attorney General and when he ran for governor, 11 million, that's a lot of votes. Some have voted, like I have, for him 4 or 5 times. Like this time I'll only be able to vote once for him. But and Tom Wolf has 488,000 votes that he got in the primary. That's all he has. So, and that, I think that helps cause the cycle thing, because the people say, well, I voted for him before, I'm going to vote for him again. So I think that's one of the things that might cause this.
Cycles, I agree with Rob that the cycle thing is not something that he or I or others in the business pay close attention to. You have a specific snapshot, you focus on that candidate, you focus on that cycle. In a way, it's almost like being a teacher in a classroom. You have a group of students come in every cycle, you do the best you can to give them the best opportunity, then the next cycle comes in. So you don't think about those trends as much. You see that on the sports analysts all the time talking about this quarterback, if he doesn't throw 30 passes, is going to lose. Then you got a guy like Chris Berman who says, well, that's why they play the games. I mean, you have to play the game. And in that regard, the cycle that either party never swept the 5 row offices in one cycle, or the 5 statewide races in 2012. We broke that.
Right.
We elected the president, Bob Casey, Kathy Kane, Rob McCord, and Eugene DePasquale. Never been done before. If we believed in the cycles, we wouldn't have put the effort in. And this is no different. I mean, and like Rob said, communications now, truly is a communications and technological arms race between the parties. And Barack Obama showed us the way when he ran in 2008. And we were way ahead of the curve, but the Republicans are working diligently to catch us in that regard. I still think that we have that advantage, and I think our communications team at the state party was second to none in America, which helped us to define Tom Corbett for 3.5 years. And that comms team has rolled into the Wolf team, and they're doing a very magnificent job in defining who Tom Wolf is, and that's why he's ahead in the polls.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the issues. I know that both campaigns do their internal polling, and you're not going to share that with us, but you must be hearing what's important to Pennsylvanians. And I know that the campaigns tend to define what's important in education, Marcellus Shale. But are you getting anything from the voters themselves about what's important to them and what they're going to be looking for over the next 4 years?
Well, what we've found out is what's very important to them right now is Barack Obama, and he has become a very big negative as far as we can see in our polls, as far as the Democrats are concerned. And Tom Wolf, of course, there's nothing that Barack Obama is for that Tom Wolf is against. He's embraced all of Barack Obama's philosophies and policies. In fact, I think Barack Obama's coming next week to campaign for Tom Wolf. I'm happy about that because our polls show that Barack Obama's lack of leadership, whether it's Ebola or ISIS, is not playing well with the people of Pennsylvania. So that's one thing I think that's pretty important. But Tom Corbett he's running on his record. That's what he needs to do, and he's got to run on his record of creating jobs. He's created 188,000 jobs. I mean, you can go right on our on the state website right now. There's 250,000 jobs that are open right now in Pennsylvania if people want to have them. And so he has done, I think, a very good job. Unemployment is down. It's 5.7%. It was 8.1% when he went in. Is he going to take credit for it? Of course not. But in Pennsylvania, we're better than the nation. And I think that one of the reasons for that is Marcellus Shale and drilling. And as Jim knows, his party voted against drilling for Marcellus Shale, the Democrat State Committee. So there would have been none of those jobs had that gone through and the Democrats had put that into effect. So there are some very clear-cut issues here, and I think the people of Pennsylvania have a real choice this time between a person who is not proven and one who has a record.
What we're hearing on the ground is that people are excited that the president's coming to see Tom Wolf. He energizes our base. He will help us to keep that 7-point lead. If some polls, and I think the more accurate ones, are about 10 points plus. So we're glad the president's coming. Number one. Number two, what are we hearing on the ground? I've been to all 67 counties. In the 20 years that I've been a chairman, whether it was Millville Borough, Allegheny County, or the state of Pennsylvania, I have never seen the number of Republicans that want to come and vote for Tom Wolf. Why is that? The primary reason is education. Irrespective of how that money got here, the fact that Tom Corbett made no effort, zero, none, to save it. You can debate on whether it should have been used this way, that way, or the other way. The fact, and these are Republicans who have children who are now in big classrooms, who are worried about falling behind. They are worried about their children's future. They don't think that this governor made an effort. They do not think that this governor cared one iota about their children. And they're coming in droves to our side because of that. So that's what we hear. We hear a lot about the education. We hear about the fact that we went from 7 to 49 in job creation. We hear about the 40,000 people cut off of adult basic. We hear about 27,000 in the education industry who are without jobs. We see a perception of people falling behind, not having hope, seeing opportunities squandered, which is why the polls are where they are.
Well, I would is it all right to rebut?
Absolutely.
Well, I was just going to say, in terms of the education issue,
in education, this
is one that's been talked about.
It is, and you know what? It's the only issue that's being used against Tom Corbett. A governor has to govern it's a huge job to do. And if you really drill down and think about why people are against Tom Corbett, it boils down to one thing: it's education. It's a teachers union. The teachers union in Philadelphia, as you know, had their contract torn up because they don't pay anything for their benefits. They can retire at full pension after 33 years. The people are sick and tired of the teachers union, and that's what is really driving this. They have been the one who've been trying to define Tom Corbett for the last 3 years. It hasn't even been the Democratic Party who has done this. So this is where we are, and this is the largest education budget in the history of Pennsylvania. It's over $10 billion. And you know, generationally, if you really think about it, today's seniors, when they were freshmen, the state is spending $8 billion more in education. We have less students. So, you know, I think it's a red herring, the education problem that Tom Wolf talks about, but it's really the only issue. And I think when the people go to the polls, they're going to look at a lot of other things when they take a look at a governor and how he has governed in Pennsylvania. And Tom Corbett has a great record of service to the people.
Jim, a real quick rebuttal, and then we
Yeah,
got to
sure.
go to break.
It's not a red herring. Education is not a red herring. But the way Rob describes it is exactly how Tom Corbett has chose to govern on it. He considers it a red herring as well. Our children's future is not a red herring. We have an educational crisis in Pennsylvania because he failed to step up and make difficult decisions on a difficult issue, and it's not the only issue. Back to the adult basic, the 40,000 cuts there, the 27,000 layoffs, the insensitive remarks made about women and their rights to make certain choices, the remark he made about not having a member of the Hispanic community in his cabinet. And it wasn't the labor unions that were driving this issue. The Pennsylvania Democratic Party built the best communications team in the United States and defined this governor correctly, which is why he was 24 points popularity before the primary.
And on that note, we're going to go to break, and we'll be right back after this.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, helping hospitals provide healing, health, and hope to communities across the state. And by the Pennsylvania Business Council, envisioning a commonwealth in which residents enjoy a very high quality of life in sustainable communities. The council works aggressively to define key long-term policy strategies and solutions to make the commonwealth more competitive, creating and sustaining a better Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by Daily Express, transporting construction, farm, and industrial equipment throughout the United States, and by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Visit pahighwayinfo.org.
Welcome back to Behind the Headlines. Maura and I are talking to the two state chairs for the Republican and Democratic parties. We're very lucky to have this opportunity. Maura, you had a question that you wanted to pose.
I'd like to make this all about me, so can we do that for 1 second?
Absolutely.
Are my taxes going to go up over the next 4 years?
Well, I think according to Tom Wolf, he has said that he is going to raise taxes, and according to the Commonwealth Foundation, 188%. And Tom Wolf won't come clean, though, and tell us exactly how much he's going to raise them, what he's going to raise them on. He proposed when he was Secretary of Revenue, you know, to raise the sales tax, to have a garbage tax, to do this tax. It's one of the things that it's making people very nervous and has caused our polls have shown, to close. And when we do polls around Pennsylvania, always number one are jobs and economic opportunity with people because they want to have a job. But taxes is number two. And Tom Wolf has made it perfectly clear that if he becomes governor, he's going to raise the taxes. But what he won't do is tell you how much he's going to raise them.
If Tom Corbett tells you that he's not going to raise taxes and he's going to sign a Norquist pledge not to do it, run for the hills. Because that's exactly what he did, and then he broke that promise. We can debate the pros and cons of the transportation bill, and there are strong arguments on both sides of that equation. The important variable in that conversation for voters in Pennsylvania to pay close attention to and be alarmed by is that Tom Corbett broke a promise and raised taxes. Tom Wolf is not pulling any punches. He's a straight shooter when he tells you there are going to be taxes at issue. He's talking about fair share. He's talking about certain demographics paying a fair share and not hurting the middle class as this governor has done. I disagree with this alleged lack of specificity. He has provided a good general outline and infrastructure of how he plans to do it. To his credit, he does not want to get into the specifics because unlike the current governor, he wants to welcome everybody to the table. have a conversation about how we're going to fill in those gaps in a fair and equitable fashion.
But if you make over $70,000 a year, and I'm not going to ask you how much you make, you're going to pay more taxes, for sure, and a lot.
Jim, you have 10 seconds.
Well, so I back to my prior statement. Taxes are going to be an issue. The governor, the next governor, Tom Wolf, has had that conversation very candidly. He has not, unlike Tom Corbett, said he is not going to do something and then turn around and break his promise.
Okay. All right. Let me ask a question to both of you about geography. I think both parties have geographic challenges. One is that the Republican Party has traditionally looked to the counties that ring Philadelphia, Montgomery, Bucks, Chester, Delaware, as the foundation stone for the statewide party. And they seem, over the last many years, seem to be trending more and more Democratic. The Democratic Party has always relied on the southwest portion of the state to be solidly Democratic, but yet those folks are Reagan and Casey Democrats that are pro-gun, pro-Second Amendment, and pro-life, and yet they tend to be trending Republican. What are the two parties doing in terms of shoring up these two areas of your traditional support, or don't you view it that way? Am I wrong?
I do. I mean, you haven't heard too much about it, but we are getting the message out right now. Tom Wolf, of course, is for gun control, and he is pro-choice. He's made it perfectly clear. That's fine for him to be whatever he's going to be. I'm glad he's honest about what he's going to be, and we're letting people know about that. I mean, that's very important to the people out in southwestern Pennsylvania. You know, we get 300,000 to 400,000 Democrats vote for us on a statewide basis. Many cycles, not every cycle, of course. They do because they really agree with the social feelings and support of our candidates. Down east, it has changed a lot, although we have still some pretty good parties in Delaware and in Chester and in Bucks County. They do come through, but it is changing. The demographics have changed. A lot of people are moving out of Philadelphia into the collar counties, and the people are much more moderate there. So you're absolutely right. It has changed. And here in the center of the state, I think the whole state is changing. There's just no question about that. I mean, all candidates now, you can't be one or the other. I mean, you're going to run to the middle, aren't you, Jim? Everybody's going to do that.
No, it has changed. I think we have done much better in recent cycles in the Southeast than we had in the past. Conversely, we saw what happened in the last gubernatorial cycle in the Southwest. Dan Honorado in his own home county is chief executive, although Tom Corbett was from there as well. But it drew attention to the fact that we need to pay attention to all demographics, not take anything for granted. Don't take any geographical locations for granted either. But having said that, the polling and the targeting and the GOTV efforts that we have made in all of those areas, and to the chagrin of Tom Corbett, even in the T, is suggesting to us that there is this change. Like Rob says, you don't take anything for granted. And it gets back to the points we mentioned in the last segment. Some of these significant points that folks believe the governor has failed are driving folks our way. So I don't see as much an ideological divide as an educational and some of the other issues. But never take your eye off any one of the 67 counties.
Okay, well, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about some of the state races. And Jim, why don't you talk a little bit about the races that you're most focused on a statewide basis?
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. In addition to reacquiring the governor's mansion, we're looking at both of the chambers as well. We do believe that Tom Wolf will be able to reach out and work in a bipartisan fashion, irrespective of which party controls either of the two chambers. But having said that, it's still good to have more partners than less. And in that regard, you look at some of the Senate races. You look at Tim Sullivan and Deb Kula out in southwestern Pennsylvania. They're very good races. They're very good candidates, and they're both doing remarkably well. And in the east, in the area that you referenced, you look at John Kane, who's put on a very good race, has a very successful fundraising cycle, has a good team around him, is doing some excellent grassroots work. So we have an opportunity to pick up the seats that we need to pick up. We need to make it even. One of the remarkable things that happened for us in 2012, in addition to those 5 offices I mentioned earlier, was that we picked up 3 Democrats in the state Senate. That hasn't been done in one night since 1971. If we can get 2 more with the lieutenant governor being the tiebreaker, we'll have at least one of the chambers. The House, it's a little bit more of a steeper hill to climb, but we have some good candidates there as well, and we think we can make significant inroads in that regard as well.
Well, we learned a lesson 2 years ago in the state Senate, so I think that we expect that we're going to win those seats back. I think we're going to expand our majorities in both the House and the Senate. a lot of these races, they're individual, they're local, they really don't follow the candidates for governor, and it's all about the effort that's put on by the people in those two chambers and how things are going to happen. The Congress, we feel pretty good about our 13 people that are in Congress now. We kind of expect that they will be going back, and we have a couple good challengers. I mean, we even have candidates in the city of Philadelphia in the 1st and the 2nd district, and they have billboards and they're out running. That's a steep mountain to climb, but you know, I think it's what I always try to do, I'm sure Jim does too, is to have good candidates in every race so that the people have a choice. I mean, I think that's very important. Even, I never give up on a district and say, oh, there's too many Democrats or this guy's too tough. You can't do that. People, it's our responsibility to hold the other party accountable, and that's his job, I think, for us too.
And that's the way it should be. I mean, you just don't write off any, I so much agree with that. Don't write off any seat, any race. If there's somebody, a Democrat that wants to run in Crawford, Texas next to George Bush, and he wants to put a campaign together, let's help that person out. What does it do at the end? It requires people to think. It requires people to have a conversation with their friends and their family and neighbors about the issues that these two candidates are presenting. That's what the whole thing is built on. And so I absolutely agree with that. Identify, recruit, and get that person out and have a conversation.
Well, I think potential candidates also see that the party's going to back you in those races too, even if it is a steep hill to climb. And it makes it probably a little bit easier to identify and get candidates.
But it's not always that way. And I know Jim probably feels that way. I mean, we do get behind people if they want to run, no matter what the district is. Right. It's part of democracy. You have to do that.
Well, in the last 15 seconds, how many points do you think Governor Corbett's going to win by, Rob?
1.
How many points do you think that Tom Wolf is going to win by, Jim?
I think he's going to be at 54 or 55.
Okay, you've heard it there. You've heard it here first. So we want to thank, Laura and I want to thank both of you for coming, and we would love to have you back after the election as well.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. We'll see you again next week on Behind the Headlines. Tune in then.